All right, so I've had a rather busy day, but we've started upgrading a few of the decks, changing a few decks, and the only deck we just got the Bloomburrow precons in, so I got all four Bloomburrow precons. Um, we're gonna upgrade uh, Obnixilis of the Black Oath Sworn to Darkness precon. We're going to upgrade and try and fix the Livio mono white commander deck precon that we had. Um, we're not gonna fix Edgar Markov. I'm gonna start playing it some more, and then we got Sauron the Dark Lord. We're gonna be fixing up a bit more as well. But the Tyranid deck we fixed up a little bit. We basically added in a number of untapped creatures to the deck, more than so than we had before, and then we might replace Rite of Passage with a secondary tutor spell because Rite of Passage could potentially be decent, but I don't know if it's better than um the tutor spell, because the tutor spell is basically, it's like, I think 2 mana and then X, and then you get to look up any creature with X from your deck. So if you have your commander down, you're potentially going to be tutoring out 2 or 3 creatures to the battlefield. And although Rite of Passage does give us a decent amount of 1/1 counters, it's pretty interesting to use. It's very much like a weaker version of Vigor in the deck. I think being able to tutor out like 2 or 3 creatures in a vital point could be good, because you could tutor out Exocrine and do, 2 damage to everyone's creature pretty easily. You can tutor out your Master Biomancer, which is one of our biggest power spikes. We could tutor out the Tyranid Prime. You could tutor out um, one of the go wide, the Gargoyle Tyranid. You could tutor out the Bio Titan potentially, but that would take a lot of mana. We could tutor out what you call it, the fractal creature that allows us to make copies of other creatures. So there's a number of things that we could potentially tutor out with that. You could even just tutor out another um, untap creature to make sure that you get more token amplification. So, and probably one of the number one things that we want to be able to tutor out at certain points of the game is going to be the Paleoloth, because this deck is going to have, essentially, it has 2 graveyard recursions. One is a spell, which is the other tutor spell, but it's also a game ending card and it's also a graveyard card. And then the second one is Paleoloth. So that's really all we got. But also, the first tutor spell and the second tutor spell can tutor for Paleoloth. If Paleoloth dies, then the second spell that we can summon could get Paleoloth back from the graveyard. But that's all the graveyard recursion we're going to get in the game. After that, we're pretty much done, except for we also have a land in the game that it's a blue land island sanctuary that allows you, when you play it, so you'd have to play it after you cast the spells, which is kind of a long shot. But if we did happen to play it later on in the game, we could potentially recycle one of those tutor spells, get another tutor spell in, or be able to bring back the Paleoloth. So should be all right. As long as we have X spells, we'll be fine for the most part. We also got Aetherize in the deck still, so we can always bounce it. But when we look at how consistent these hands are, they're actually pretty good. Like, these aren't turn 2 competitive win decks for sure, and it doesn't have enough removal and stuff to really stop somebody from using a combo deck and killing you turn 2. But all the times I've played the deck before adding these untapped creatures so far, I've obliterated the table consistently, everyone's deck. And one of those decks was a deck that actually pops off turn 2 and kills the table consistently all the time. And me and a dragon deck basically teamed up against him, kind of destroyed his commander a couple of times. And then, like, by turn 4, I think it was like turn 4, turn 5, I summoned, like, I tutored out 3 creatures, and then I casted an X spell the next turn that made like 12/12 flying Ward 2 Tyranids that destroyed things when they came in, wiped his board out, and then ended the game literally on like turn 6. So It's a pretty interesting deck, and it is built to be more like Tyranid lore. I don't see the Tyranids being super good versus like artifacts and enchantments. This deck is not the best versus artifact and enchantments. There's one card in the whole deck that deals with artifacts and enchantments. But when it comes to a fist fight, it can pretty much take out any deck so far that I've put it against in a direct fist fight. No real issues. Main weak spots, just artifact and enchantment, type of like pillow 40 decks and stuff. And you have what you call it. If people hate out your commander, so basically when I start playing this deck, what I do is I politic a little bit, try to figure out who wants to be on the friendly side of the Tyranids. If there's like a pillow 40 deck that I know I'm going to be weak against, then I'll just kind of sit back and then just see if somebody will open up a gap for me, and then as soon as I kill them, it's over. But like a hand like this, you kind of get these kind of consistently, but you can already look that turn 1, Terramorphic Expanse, find a land. Turn 2, Command Tower, play Chorus Follower. Turn 3, land. Then you tap Chorus Follower, untap a land, have 4 mana, play your Commander. Commander puts +1/+1 counter on itself, so she becomes a 2/2. Turn 4, you could do 3 mana, Patriarch Seal comes down. Tap your commander, play Mage Right Stone. Turn 5, you could do 3 mana, Belmouth Beckoner, or Korra comes out. And then essentially you would, these 3 would be tapped, then you would tap your commander. Or, hold on, you do, just do these 3, tap Korra's Follower, untap a land. Then you would tap the land to get your green mana, tap your commander for 2. Use the commander's 2 to fuel these 2 seals to untap your commander. Then you would tap for 2 more, you get 4. And then you would untap her, or use her to untap it again. You get 6 mana, and you get 3 copy effects. And you would play Termagant Swarm for 6. You get 3 copies. That would be 6 sixes that allow you to draw 3 cards, and then when they die, they would create a number of 1/1 green Tyranid tokens equal to its power. So if these die, they're going to drop 6/6, or they're going to drop 6 1/1 tokens for each of the tokens that you have. So you can already see how fast something like this can kind of take off. And that's a pretty consistent, like, that's a turn 4, turn 5 play. Now I got 3 6/6s, and as soon as you destroy them, I'm going to have uh, 18 1/1s. That's a pretty big deal, you know. That's kind of the things that you're going. But I'm just going in here and like pushing the draw hands and just seeing what you can do. So here we got 4 lands. So we could already play our commander off the jump just with his hand. So turn 1, could play a tap land, but we don't have anything to do turn 2. So turn 1, we'll do green. Then we'll put the Ozolith down, which saves our 1/1 counters. Turn 2, tap land. Turn 3, we play land, play Garruk's Uprising. We won't get the card draw because we don't have a creature with 4 greater power, but that's fine. Creatures have trample, and then if we play something with 4 power or greater, we get to draw a card. And then turn 4, we're playing 4, paying for our commander, which is going to bump us up to 6 mana. Turn 5, you tap for 6, put Xenothrope down for 4, so that you would get 2 4/4 flyers with Flying Ward 2, and then when it enters, it deals X damage to any target. So you're going to be able to do 4 damage to 2 targets, draw 2 cards because of Group's Uprising. You have 2 blockers, and you still got your commander, and your commander puts 1/1 counters on things during combat, so you could do whatever. Turn 5, we don't have that, but we could play Helm of the Host. And then turn 6, we could equip Helmet of the Host to either your commander, or you could put it on the Xenothrope. So if you Helm of the Host the Xenothrope, every turn you're just going to have another Xenothrope pop in and deal X damage to any target. So you could just sit there and burn your opponent to death. If you put it on your commander, then you're just going to get more and more commanders, more and more copies, more and more mana. So the next X spell that we get would be massive. And the game in here says that this deck is like very casual as well, but essentially this deck is like a turn like 4 through 6 type of deck. It seems like that's what you're looking at. Turn 4 through 6, you kind of pop off, and if you don't get shut down really hard, it gets out of hand pretty quick. What we do here? We got this. We only got one land, but we do have Nexos. I don't think there's any way we fix this. Essentially, you could go, turn, because how I'm looking at it right now is that we have one land, one mana rock. Uh, Technically, Nexos is going to be a mana card, so it's going to give us kind of a 50-50 shot to get a land. Something along that. Probably not. It might take 2 turns to get a land, so I'm kind of thinking here. You play the land. If you got a second land, then you could play Nexos, but then you can only use that to cast X spells. So you could play Hive Guard and you could play Exocrine with 2 lands. So as soon as you get a second land here, you play Nexos, and then on your next turn, basically you can tap 1 land for a green, and then you could tap the other land for 2 colorless and play Tyrant Guard. So you can sacrifice it, and creatures you control can get counters on them, getting side-proof and indestructible, but it's a 3/3, so you'd have a card to kind of do something. Otherwise, you could kind of try and do, well, Expiring Call doesn't really help you all here, I don't think either. I'd probably do those 3, play Hive Tyrant, or if you get a red mana, you could kind of chill out. And you could play Exocrine. And then that'll do 2 damage to each opponent. Oh no, it won't, because it won't have 1/1 counters. So if you get a blue mana, you can play Kelpie Guide. And then when Kelpie Guide, the next turn, you'd have 2... you'd have green, blue, and then you could untap a land to get 2 green or 2 blue, or you could get 2 colors. You'd have enough to play hero specs. So you go turn 1 forest, then you hope for a land, second land Nexos, Nexos into Kelpie Guide, and then Kelpie Guide into Haruspex, which when things die, it's going to get a 1/1 counter, and then you can remove the 1/1 counter to add mana. Or no, that's 4 mana. So you could play, no, you can't play your commander because you'd be missing 1 color. So yeah, you do Kelpie Guide into Haruspex, and then from Haruspex, you need a 1/1 counter, or you need or actually no, you got a Coalition Relic. I'm dumb. Okay, yeah. So you'd go, because this only works on X spells. So you go 1 land, turn. Look for your second land. Then you would play Nexos. Then the next turn, you would go land and then tap the second land. Or no, we can't, because we can only use this mana for stuff that's X spells. That's kind of bad. That's bad for us. So we couldn't do that. Oh, should I replace that card? We could replace that card. This card is good though because it allows you, it ramps you up when you have a bunch of lands. Like if the game goes later on, and you have a bunch of lands. This can get you a bunch of mana for an X cost, but you don't necessarily need it with your commander. But also, your commander, this guy, and the other Magus that we have in the deck can generate a ton of mana because essentially your commander can tap for, two, like you can tap your lands, tap your commander, activate the other Mangra, which would then untap your lands, give you a bunch of mana because you just tap them again, and then the ability would copy. Lands would untap again, and then you'd have a ton of mana there, and then each of those lands would be tapping for double mana. So if you paid like X in, like you paid 8, tapped your commander, copied it, untapped 8, you'd get 16 on the first one, and then you get, or technically, if you tapped, you'd only have to tap like 4 lands to get, oh no, that's an X-Bell, but you can use this guy with that. So you could tap 4 lands to get 8 mana with this guy. So 4 lands, commander, you would get 10 mana. So you'd have 2 floating anyway. So 4 lands in your commander, you would get 8 mana, activate the other Mangra, untap the lands. Or you wouldn't even need that. You'd need 4 lands, so you get 8 mana. You'd use 4 mana. So you'd have 10 mana, then you'd have 6 floating. 4 mana would be left over. Put that into the other Mangus. It doubles it. So then you would get 16 more mana. So you'd have like 24 mana. You'd have 24 like colorless mana for an X-Spell, or you'd have 12 mana for something else. But 24 is pretty big. That's why I'm kind of not. That's why I'm not fully sure about dumping Nexos. The only other card that I would have to fix, like to put in here, is we could either put the other tutor card here instead, or we could put the Jackal Tyranid motorcycle rider back in there because it's a 3-drop. But if we look at where is it? Chord of Calling. Yeah, Chord of Calling is probably too much mana. This is 3 and then X. So like even my base play needs to get to like 4. So this is kind of rough. Because like getting this to 4 mana for our master Biomancer would be kind of hard. But getting this to like 5, where we could, if we get this to 5, X would be 2 with our commander, copy this, then you would be able to search out the, you wouldn't be able to search out Master Biomancer or anything, but you could search out Mangus of Calibera, and then you could search out the other guy. Or I guess you could search out Animar as well, but you could search out that guy, you could search out your tappers. So yeah, I don't know. I think I probably would put the tutor effect, take the rite of passage out, put the other tutor effect in, because just the off chance that you have that in your starting hand, you can tutor out. Basically, you need 6 mana to tutor out these guys. 5 or 6 mana, depending on which one that you want. Like this guy you could get for 5 mana. This guy you could get for 4, which is good, but I don't think there's any other 1-cost spells that we could find. Like you could summon things that would die instantaneously unless they just came in with 1/1 counters. We got 1 artifact. Total 6. Oh, you get hardened scales. Can't do that. Can't do that. So you could do Hormigant Horde, which is not too shabby. I mean, because it's whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, you can pay 3 and return it to your hand. So that's not bad. So if you only had 4 mana, you could at least search out Hormigant Horde. If you searched out Mangus of Calibera, all he does without anything else is mana fix you for the most part. That's all that really happens there until your commander's on the field. Him plus your commander is ramp, but him by himself is just mana fixing. Or if you have the other guy, it becomes a lot better because you can have basically 2 lands, then have 1 land tap for 2 colorless, put the 2 colors into him, he untaps the lands, then you get 3 mana out of 2 lands, which is pretty good. And then if you untap them, how would that work? If you had the other, so if say you had 2 lands, this guy on field, and then you had the other guy on the field, your lands could tap for 2 colorless. And let's say that you had something on the field that could untap a permanent, then you could do 1 mana floating, 2 colorless, 2 colorless go into him, he taps, untaps the 2 lands, then you would use the permanent to untap him, then you would tap a land, have 2 mana, tap him, untap both lands, and then you'd have 4 regular mana, or you would have 8 mana that you could cast on an X spell. So, kind of interesting to see that. Basically, though, for 5 mana is what you'd want to do. You want to get up to 5, which if you have your commander or whatever, that's good. Then with 5 mana, you could search out this guy and the other guy. This guy. Both of them on the field, your lands can basically overcharge and double their mana using this dude. And then with your commander, you can like triple your mana with this guy, which allows you to cast really big X spells. But you won't be able to make multiple copies of the X spell that you use unless you untap and tap your commander repeatedly. So you can basically untap and tap this guy to get as much mana as you possibly want and dump it into like one big creature that, you know, comes in and does a whole bunch of damage to everything. Or you could just tap this like once or twice, get like 12 or 20 mana or something, make like a 10/10, copy it like 2 or 3 times, get a similar effect with more bodies. But the only other thing, if you got 5 mana, you could search out. You need 2 drops. Can't do those. So you could search out Xenothrope, which is like one of the big early combos, but you wouldn't get any X off of it. Can't get that for X. You could get this guy, but it fights when it enters the battlefield, so you could get him for like a removal, and you could get him for an untap. Turvagon isn't really good to search out. Nexus is probably the one that you want. This guy you can't really search out. What's this? Starstorm? Yeah. So, yeah. It looks like if you go for 5, you're going for those 2 mana dorks immediately. Because it's going to be able to fix your mana and ramp up your X spells pretty quick. But other than that, it's not going to be super worthwhile. So this one, we have 2 lands, the mana guy, another mana guy, mana rock, or not a mana rock, untap rock. So 2 green is kind of rough here. I would probably say this one, I mean, we could still do stuff. So turn 1, forest, turn 2, forest, then you play Nexos. Nexos comes in, basic lands can tap for 2 colorless for X spells. Next turn, you just play Mage Right Stone. Hopefully, you draw into a land that turn or the next turn. Then you could play Kadama of the West Tree, which would at least give you some mana, and you'd have a little bit of trample. If you got a blue mana at that point, you could cast Aggressive Biomancy, because basically you would tap both. Yeah. Oh wait, hold on. How would you do this? You tap. You tap your green and your land, untap creature that has active. The Mage Right Stone doesn't really do much for us. Basically, if you had a blue, you'd go blue, green, and then you would have 2 colorless with the other land. Aggressive Biomancy copies target creature control, but it fights when it enters. So then you could copy Kadama of the West Tree. But that wouldn't help you out. You'd basically have to copy Nexos, which just gives you another 2/2. But I guess, I mean, you would still have that. If you got a red mana, then you could cast Mawlock, which is probably the best that you could do. You get a red mana, tap 2, tap this for 2, cast Mawlock. Comes in with as a 4/4, fights something. Next turn, you play like Kadama of the West Tree. Mawlock attacks. You get to pull out a land or whatever. Then you can play aggressive Biomancy or your commander. But yeah, this land would, I think you would be okay, but it just depends on what land you get. Because if you get a blue here, it'd be pretty rough. But it really wouldn't be as bad as we think it is. Because I mean, if you get blue, you get blue, green, green. You can still play Katama of the West Tree, and you can still play this guy. So you'd have 5 power on board. This has reach for flyers. You only need 1 more mana to cast your commander at that point. Then you'd instantly be up to 6. Then you got Mage Right Stone would come in. Then you could play aggressive Biomancy, copy your Malwalk or copy your Nexios. Put 1/1 counters from your commander on, which would allow you to pull out more lands, ramp up. So like there's things that you can do there. This one, Animar we just stuck in the deck, so I'm going to see how he plays out. We took out the other mana dork for this guy. The other mana dork, I think, was a 2... Oh, let me look. Who was that guy? So we took out We took out Atlan Jackal for Animar. So that would have been a 3-drop green-red colorless. So that would have been his play here. Atlan Jackal would be trample haste, get him down turn 3, smack somebody, you could search out a land. Animar, we get him down turn 3. He doesn't really do anything until we cast a creature spell. So there's not a whole lot that we could do. You do like turn 3 Patriarch Seal, turn 4 Commander, and then we'd have turn 5 Animar, 1/1 counter on Animar, reduces the cost to 2 and to 4. But if we had the Jackal in there, it would have been turn 3 Jackal, attack with Jackal, land. Then you go turn 4 Commander, 1/1 counter on Jackal, makes him a 3/3. Attack and get more lands. The other mana dork that we could have is the Biophagus, which we took out for something else, which would have been a 2-drop. Add 1 mana of any color, and if it's a creature spell, you put a 1/1 counter on it. So if we had that guy, it would be turn 2 Biophagus. And then turn 3 Patriarch Seal. Turn 4 Commander. So Biophagus might be better in this situation because Animar doesn't help us early. And it does put an extra 1/1 counter on things, which is good as well. But with Animar here, basically what would happen is I'm a little split on this because I like the Jackal a bit because it has trample and haste built in. If someone's open for us to attack on turn 3 and we get that land, and we summon our commander turn 4, the Jackal keeps getting bigger, we keep getting more lands, it thins out the deck more and more. With Phagus, our commander would come in with an extra 1/1 counter. It would be a little bit slower. Later into the game, it wouldn't be as good as it is, but since we have like doubling effects in the deck, it wouldn't necessarily be terrible because we have like even with the Kelpie guides and stuff, if we like tap Kelpie guide, untap because Biophagus can give us any color. So even here it would be turn 2 Biophagus, turn 3 you could do Kelpie guide, turn 4 you could do 3 lands, Biophagus, tap Kelpie guide, tap Biophagus, summon your commander, commander comes in, 1/1 counter, um, on whatever. And then turn 5 or whatnot, you could tap for 6, 7, or you could tap for 6 and then 8 because Kelpie God would untap and then tap your commander for 8. And you could play a number of things like with 8 mana. But Animar would ramp up a bit more. So like if you got Animar off turn 3, commander comes down, it gets double counters, then Kelpie Guide only cost 1 mana. And Gene Stealer would go down to 3 mana. And the longer he's on the field, the bigger your X spells would get. But we might have to look at Biophagus and try to stick him back in somewhere. I'm not sure. Because right here, I feel like Biophagus would be really good in this hand. Because it makes it just a little bit faster. See, but late game, what you're looking at is, let's say mid to late game, you play Biophagus, then you're only getting 1 mana and potentially a 1/1 counter on a creature. which isn't terrible, but it isn't the best. If you play Animar and then you cast a creature spell or you cast something else on top of that, or you transfer the 1/1 counters from something else to the Animar, and then things like Bio Titan, or what is it? Is it just creature spells you cast cost one less? Yeah, so I don't know. That's a tough one because let's look at the stuff here. So if we have Biophage out, he counts as a Tyranid, so he would trigger one of our draws when he comes in. He would trigger some of our in-game creatures if he hit with an attack. Um, yeah, because he would trigger Kindred Discovery. He triggers Hardened Scales and the other things that would double his 1/1 counters, so he could potentially be adding 2 1/1 counters to a creature. 2, 3, 4. He can put more 1/1 counters on other creatures. That's probably his biggest bonus, is that Animar can't put 1/1 counters on other creatures. He just reduces the cost. But late game, if we play Anaphage for 2, he pays 1 mana from himself. So we're basically paying him for 1. And then we're getting a 1/1 counter for the other mana, which could potentially be 1 to 4 counters on the next creature that we cast. Or give us mana, or color fixing early game for our commander, or some other play. If we play Animar by himself, he does nothing. But Balphagus is going to take 2 turns to activate anyway. So you'd play Balphagus turn 2. You can't do anything until turn 3. Late game, you're going to play him, and then the next turn you would get 1 mana and a 1/1 counter on a creature. Animar, I don't know. With the commander, you could get like 1 or 2 counters on him pretty easy. There's a number of things that could give him 1/1 counters. And let's say like if he had 2, let's say he had 2 1/1 counters on him, then every X spell that we cast gets amplified by the amount of counters that's on him. So like if he has 10 1/1 counters, then we can cast this for 12, but only for having 2 mana, which just amplifies everything way higher than it would be. But I don't know if there's anything we could change about that. The only cards that I'm kind of skeptical about right now is the S6 Fractal Bloom, because it's a 6-drop, and like you can turn a token that you make into another creature that's on the battlefield, which just sounds good. But it's also a 6-drop. But it might be the only way that we make like copies of something important that we need. So if I was going to do anything, I'd probably drop Fractal Bloom for the Biophage, maybe. And then the Rite of Passage I could potentially drop for that tutor card. Because the tutor's 3 and X. So kind of cover up with that, but I'm a bit split on it. I just feel like the Biophage would be I cut him for something else too. I cut him for an untapped creature, I think. See, but he's basically a mana rock. But I don't really want to go under 35 lands. It's kind of, we're at a sweet spot right now. We could potentially cut something like Hardened Scales. It's flavorful though. We cut Hardened Scales before, but we have, I think, 3 cards that do something like that. Hardened Scales in the deck, which is pretty big. And then we have Rite of Passage, which, like, this is, I'm still not sure about, but like, if you have Hardened Scales and stuff out, if someone like blocks one of your Tyranids, then all of a sudden they get like 3, 4, 5, 6 counters. That's pretty big. Or like if you have 4/4 creatures and you do like an X spell for like 2, then everything would just grow by 1. Like you just get +1/+1 counters on everything that you hit on your side, which would be kind of interesting to see. Or if like someone was swinging in at you, you could do it too. Like if you have Rite of Passage, Hardened Scales, Doubling Season or something on there, and then you like cast it for 1 damage. The 1 damage hits all your creatures. They all get buffed up by 1. Triggers, Hardened Scales. They all get buffed up by 2. Triggers Doubling Season. They all get buffed up by 4. That's pretty big. But this Biophage, what could I do here? There's not much of anything I could see. The tappers are all pretty good. The Biophage has a better low end. But Animar Soul of the Elements has a better high end. Because say, like, if I manage to get 4 counters on this guy, all of my creature spells get reduced by 4. This comes in default as a 4/4. This would come in default as a 7/7. Whereas like the other guy would come in as like a 4/4. Like this guy, you could even cast this for 1 green for a 3/3 if you needed to. Like if you had Animar down and you had Kindred Discovery down, or like Garruk's Uprising or something, you could pay like 1 mana, Broodlord comes in, triggers a draw. 1 mana, Clever Conjurer comes in, triggers a draw or whatever, But he's not a Tyranid, so it's kind of hard to do. I would be so tempted to do the Fractal Bloom, but the thing is like, the Fractal Bloom allows you to make copies of anything on the field, enemy or you, any creature. So it's like one of the only ways you can make copies of the Bio Titan. You can make copies of your Kelpies and your Chorus followers and stuff. So you can get, like, let's say each turn that you're making a token copy. Like, let's say you have Doubling Season or something out. And you like double Kelpie's Guide with this. Or you have like Fractal Bloom out and you equip Helm of the Host to it. It doesn't get affected by legendary rules. And then every time that you make your first token, you could potentially turn your Fractal Bloom into another creature. Like any creature that you want. So, and then I don't know how that would work if you double trigger. The first time you would create 1 or more tokens. You may instead choose a creature, that many tokens that are the copy of that creature. I think you would just do, you can only activate this once, even if you have clones. But the fact that you could clone your mana dorks, you can clone your untapping creatures, you can clone your big hitters or your swarm lords or whatever else that you want, is kind of a big deal. Like, even if I had this down, like, if I put Helm of the Host on my commander, Helm of the Host triggers, makes a copy of my commander, then this right here could copy anytime that, like, I cast X spells, the first one I could turn into a copy of my token copied commander, and then I would just have more and more X spells over and over and over and over again. So that's all kind of interesting stuff to think about. It's just weird things because like this would cost 2 mana instead of 3. This would cost 1 mana instead of 2. This would cost 1 mana instead of 2. Um, 2 mana instead of 4. Every mana that we don't spend is something that we can amplify something else with, even though we would probably, amplify everything that we could. This would cost 2 instead of 4. I just see Animar popping off when you have like Tyranid Prime or something down, or not Tyranid Prime. Yeah, Tyranid Prime down, and then he reduces everything down to like a minuscule amount of mana, like 2 drops, and then each of those trigger a draw. So then you could just 2 drop draw, 2 drop draw, 2 drop draw, and then all the time like the thing is amplifying the power of everything. Vigor would cost like 3 mana pretty quickly. I don't know. Animar just. It's a 3 drop creature. I mean, it gets protection from white and black, which is already kind of good. Because this is like a creature that I could guaranteed swing through like a white enchantment deck or something. Maybe. Or like, doesn't. It has like a form of protection. It reduces everything. So like eventually, like if I get two or three counters on this, and then I start summoning things for 2 mana repeatedly, this thing's just gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger. I could see potentially trading a land for the mana dork guy, but I really don't want to go down to 34 lands. I have problems with 34 lands in decks. Because now, like, when we get those 2 land hands, we're going to end up having, like, 1 land and then the mana dork guy. Maybe. I need something else. Rite of Passage is going to be that tutor card, probably. Like, I don't see us doing anything. Because, like, Rite of Passage is potentially a really good source of getting 1/1 counters, but it doesn't, what you call it? It doesn't protect them, like if a 3 power creature gets blocked by a 4 power creature, this would trigger, but the creature dies before the 1/1 counter gets put on it. So it doesn't do much for that. But if your big creatures get through, especially with like the trample that we have, you swing like a 10/10 at somebody and they try to chump block it, or they block it with like a 4/4, then this would trigger a 1/1 counter, which isn't that big of a deal. Like you're like, why would a 10/10 really care about a 1/1 counter? But when you have hardened scales or any of those other ones up there, it's 2/1 counters, 3/1 counters, 4/1 counters on every creature. If someone blasphemous sacks all your creatures, they all get 1/1 counters. And then like yeah, like all of that would be pretty nuts. But I think this being the tutor card, it would just be better. Because this can give us 1/1 counters, but when things take damage, this can give us 1/1 counters, but it would be a little slow. You have to attack in and then get the 1/1 counters. Whereas if we have the tutor card, we can potentially find bio master biomancer, and this guy's like our main power booster. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of additional 1/1 counters on it equal to Master Biomancer's power and as a mutant in addition to its other types. This guy right here, like, we would have to pay 7 to tutor him out with that card, but with our commander on the field, we can already usually get 6 mana. Like, one more mana won't be that big of a deal. And then when he comes in, she buffs him by 1 generally, automatically. So everything's coming in with 3 1/1 counters instantaneously. Um, which with Rite of Passage would have taken 3 turns, or at least have taken like an auto attack to get in. So we could potentially do Rite of Passage with the Mana Dork guy for now because it's still going to give us a 1/1 counter. But then we would need to find some sort of replacement for the mana guy. His name is Biophagus, I believe. Biophagus. What's going on, Nancy? Doing all right. Just trying to make decisions, all right? Making magic decisions, it's kind of hard. I got hard choices, man. Ah. It really just comes down to Animar, though. I don't know if you know anything about Magic, but if you could, like, share your opinion on this, I'd probably be pretty grateful about it. So Animar, Soul of Elements, is an elemental 3-drop creature. He gets 1/1 counters when you cast creatures, and then every time that you cast a creature, it costs 1 less for each 1/1 counter that it has. So it makes all of my big creatures super cheap to cast, and it gets pretty big itself when I'm casting creatures. And it makes all my X spells way bigger than they would be. But in my opening hands, it's kind of slow. And then if I play it mid to late game, it needs 1/1 counters before it can start doing anything. But if I replace it with Biophagus, which I took out, 2-drop, so it could potentially come out earlier. Mana Dork taps for any color, so it can mana fix me. And it adds 1/1 counter on things that come in. It's a Tyranid that could potentially trigger card draw. I can search this card out with tutor effects if I wanted to, because I don't have very many cards that are 1 or 2 drops. So the two tutor cards that I put in, I have a combo that I essentially have to pay for 2-drop cards to grab. But if I wanted any extra like mana cards or anything, I wouldn't be able to. Like I could search out Biophagus with a combo if I could copy it 3 times, but if I only copy it 2, then I can get the better combo off, you know. I don't know. I'm split on this because Biophagus also has synergy with the deck because it's a Tyranid. It can trigger Kindred Discovery. It can trigger the Tyranid cards that care about uh, things dealing damage. I think this is one of them. Whenever another Tyranid deals combat damage to a player, you can create a gargoyle. But it's a mana dork, so it doesn't necessarily need to do damage, you know? That's probably the other thing, is that Animar is more aggressive. If he gets 1/1 counters on it, you attack with him, whereas the other guy you don't. I need to basically look when we get to the card shops. I'll go to the card shop tomorrow and see if I can get any input on it. Hmm. Yeah, but if we keep drawing hands on, so right here we have another hand drawn with Animar. All right. So this one, 3 lands, so you would have enough to play Animar, right? So turn 1 Frontier, turn 2 Mountain, turn 3 Island. Then you play Animar, right? With the other guy, turn 2, I would play him. Turn 3, I'd play land, tap, play my commander. But with Animar, we're looking at turn 4, hopefully getting a land. Because we don't have any way to do 1/1 counters. With 3 mana, we can still play Twinning Staff. We could still play Mawloc. So that would be the only saving grace that we would have. So you go turn 3 Animar, turn 4 Mawloc for 1, or Mawloc for 2. Or I think what you would do here is turn 4, if you got another land, you would pay 2 mana, cast Mawloc for 0. Animar would get a 1/1 counter. And then you would have 1 land that you would tap. First things first, you would need a green. Or no, we have a green. So you'd have 1 land to tap. Animar would reduce the cost by 1. So if you had 4 lands, then you could tap 2 extra lands, and then you'd have 1 extra mana to drop in Spore Crest to make it a 1/1. Then Animar would get 2 1/1 counters, which would make turn 5 Tyranid Prime would cost 2 instead of 4. Which is pretty good. Now, if this was Biophagus, turn 2 Biophagus, turn 3 Commander, turn 4, you could do 6 mana, double Spore Crest. So you'd be able to do Spore Crest for 2, have 1 floating mana left. Or actually, you could do Twinning Staff and then Spore Crest. But let's just say that you did Spore Crest for 2. Search your library for X basic land cards. So you'd get 4 lands. And you'd already have a bunch of mana going. Like that's just a lot smoother than what Animar's doing here. Because Animar, turn 3 Animar. If we don't draw a land, you'd go turn 4 Mawloc. That would reduce things cost by 1. And then if you didn't draw land there, you could do Spore Geist for 1, search out 1 land, get another 1/1 counter on Animar, and then the next turn, you could do Tyranid Prime for 2. And then Animar would have 3 1/1 counters, so it'd be a 4/4, and then you would have a pretty solid board coming out. But like if Tyranid Prime or if Animar dies, you just lose all of that. If you ever bring him back, it would take a while for him to go again. Like you already see, it took like 3 turns for him to go. Whereas like if we brought back the other guy, he's just down. He's a mana dork. He taps for 1. He gives a 1/1 counter. And then if we have doubling season or parallel lives or hardened scales or any of the other things that double, we got like 5 cards that basically would double his 1/1 counter ability. So with him, he mana fixes us early. He grows things slowly, but I mean, he does grow them. And it isn't every turn, but he can at least do 1 creature every turn, you know? Hmm. All right. So now we got another hand. We got an Evolving Wilds. We got Nexios, Twinning Staff. So we only got 2 lands. See, but here you could do Evolving Wilds for. This is kind of rough because we got 2 expensive cards. You do Evolving Wilds for a blue, probably. Or no, you can't. Uh, yeah, this one's rough. Evolving Wilds for a red. Or no, Evolving Wilds for green. Play the mountain. Play Nexios. Then you need basically 1 more land. I think what you would do with this is that you would do Evolving Wilds for green, second turn mountain, play Nexios. Then you'd be waiting for your next land, and you'd play Exocrine for 2. Or no, you couldn't. You'd have to play yeah, you just have to play Exocrine flat as a 2/2 probably. Yeah, that's probably not the best move. I think what you do here, so Evolving Wilds Island, turn 2 mountain, then you turn 3 hope you draw land, Kelpie Guide. Whenever you get your other land with Kelpie Guide, you would then, the next turn, untap a land. You'd have 4 mana, Commander. Then you would do 6 mana. It's kind of hard to do that because Exocrine would kill your Commander, but you'd basically do, you'd have enough mana, you would play Twinning Staff. Depending on if you get green or not, you could go Exios, but you go Twinning Staff. Then I'd probably like put 1/1 counters on my commander maybe, or if I was feeling good enough to recast her, because you'd have to recast her for 6. I'd probably just threaten the Exocrine. Evolving Wilds, Island, Mountain, get a land, Kelpie Guide, Commander. Then you'd have Twinning Staff. You could cast Exocrine for 1. That's probably the best. Like, that's probably the only thing that you could do that would like not kill the commanders. You'd have to slowly put 1/1 counters on her and alternate. Like, I'd probably slow play this pretty hard, like thinking on it, because you do Evolving Wilds Island, then you play a mountain. Okay, then you get your next land. You play Kelpie Guide. You play your commander. Commander puts a 1/1 counter on itself, which gives it a 2/2, and Kelpie Guide would be a 2/2. Then you play, Twinning Staff. You put another 1/1 counter on your commander. Kelpie Guide's a 2/2, and then you got a 3/3 commander. Next turn, play Nexios, or maybe you don't. Um, you could potentially try and play Kindred Discovery to get card draw, but I mean, if you got your commander out, you could probably just play Swarm Lord, to be honest. That would probably be the play. You either slow play the first and you put 1/1 counters. So, like, if you put 1/1 counters on your commander and Kelpie Guide over and over, and you get it to like a 4/4, and you cast Exocrine for like 2, um, and like detonate the board, kill all the small stuff, keep your commander alive. I mean, you could potentially lose Kelpie Guide here. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. You get Twinning Staff. So you just do that, put 1/1 counters on your commander until you get it to like 4 or 5. Let's say you spent 5 turns, it's a 6/6. You play Exocrine for 2, you copy it, you make 2 Exocrine. So they come in as 4/4s. You'd be able to keep both of them alive. So you'd have 2 4/4s and your commander. Commander would take 4 damage, it would survive by 1. Or conversely, you get to that point where you have your commander out, then you tap everything down, cast Swarm Lord, which will come in as a 7/7. And then when a creature you control with a 1/1 counter and it dies, you draw a card. So you put 1/1 counter on Kelpie Guide, you put a 1/1 counter on your commander, and if anything happens to your board at that point, you could just get a bunch of cards when everything dies. So at that point, you could probably just play Exocrine yourself, kill everything off besides like Swarm Lord, and just swing at people for 7 damage. Draw 3 cards, ramp up your mana again, maybe play Kindred Discovery, play your commander again for 6, comes back, play Nexios, draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on Nexios. Swarm Lord would probably take the blunt here. There's moves that you could make, but it's not really like as smooth as I would like. Uh, 2 lands. So, Thriving Grove, turn 1. Probably name blue, or red. I don't think it really matters in this situation. Name blue or red. Turn 2, you play Forest. Tap 1. Play Hardened Scales. Turn 3, you hope for a land. If you get a land, then you play Coalition Relic. Then you can play your commander. Then you can play Twinning Staff. And then, I mean, it just depends on what you draw at that point, because we don't really have any creatures in this hand. But you could just put 1/1 counters on your commander, and then when someone tries to blow her up, play Repulsive Mutation, buff her up really big. I mean, it's probably the best move that you got, to be honest. Next hand, we got 4 lands. So this one isn't too bad because Toxicrin actually mana fixes us. So turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, Garruk Uprising. Turn 4, Toxicrin comes in, then all lands can tap for all colors. Turn 5, Commander. Turn 6, we do Tyranid Harridan for 6 mana. So we'd have a 4/4 Ward 4 flying. And then when it deals combat damage, it's going to make a Tyranid. So the next turn, we could potentially start generating Tyranids. Turn 7, we get Primal Vigor down. And when we attack with those Tyranids, they're going to be making twice as many Tyranids every time. Because when Tyranid Hydrogen attacks, it's going to make a 1/1 Gargoyle Tyranid. Then when those two attack, they're going to make 2 more Gargoyle Tyranids. When those attack, they're going to make 4 more. And then with Primal Vigor, everything's going to be multiplied. So we have a really strong opening start right here. Not bad. Draw hand. We got 4 or 5 lands, so I might just keep the Evolving Wilds in hand. This doesn't help us much here, so I think we go Temple, Scry 1. We don't really need a land, so we could try to find something else, I guess. Turn 2, Forest, Awfulest Shadowing Spire. Turn 3, Mountain, Nexios, or you go Mountain, Magus. Turn 4, Nexios. I mean, well, turn 4, you go Commander. And then you would have, uh, basically, you do 4 mana, summon the Commander, tap the Commander for 2 next turn. So you'd have 6 mana in the next turn. So you go 2 for Nexios. Then you could do the Commander. You could do Nexios or the Commander to amplify your mana to get as much mana as you can for next spell. And basically, like turn 5, turn 6, you're dropping a big creature on the board. Probably. Next hand, we have Mountain Thriving Grove. So we got 3 lands. Pretty good. Turn 1 Thriving Grove. 2 X spells with nothing. This is kind of a little bit poo. So turn 1 Thriving Grove, turn 2 Command Tower, turn 3 Mountain. Turn 4 we play Spiro Crest for 3. We get to search out 1 land. Then we take that, summon our commander, turn 5. And then next turn we would have 6 mana. And we could play Ravager or Xenothrope and get 2 of them for 4. So we wouldn't have enough for a card draw, but we'd have enough to play and get 2 blockers, 2 attackers. So if there's something threatening on the opponent's side, do Ravager. If there's something that we just want to get rid of and start getting the tempo going, play Xenothrope. And then the next turn, we could potentially play the Ravager or Old One Eye, and then Old One Eye makes a 5/5, and then everything gets, trample, and we'd be kind of in the races at that point because you'd have 2 4/4s and a 6/6, so literally like 2 turns someone could die. And then we have the Flash Ravager up, so if someone brings something scary, we can just flash it in and make everything attack our opponents. Wouldn't be too bad. 2 forests. It's not amazing hand, if we're gonna be honest. Not very great. But what we do have is Korra and Kadama. But the mana's kind of bad. We do got Termagant Swarm. That kind of gives us some stuff here. So this is like a pure green hand. Kind of interesting. So you turn 1, turn 2, Forest. And then I would probably, I guess turn 2, you could just summon the Termagant for 1 if you wanted to. And then turn 3, you look for a land. If you get a land, you play Kadama of the West Tree. Attack with your creature, you get a land. If you don't get a land, then you don't do anything until you get a land. And then you can play Kadama. And then maybe you would have one other color with that. So, yeah, let's say you get Kadama off and you get another land, then you might be kind of color scrapped because you would need another color. So, probably play Greater Good, sacrifice the Termagant Swarm to draw a card. And then you'd have to discard 3. Might not be the best option if we're going to be honest. I don't know. If we sack the Termagant Swarm, then we discard, Primal Vigor, Doubling Season, and something else. We're not going to get either of those back. Those are our 2 major token doublers, which sucks. But I don't think there's much else that we could do in this situation. The only thing I could figure is that if Greater Good doesn't pull its weight, then we could replace Greater Good with Biophagus. And that would round out this hand pretty well right here, because then you'd have turn 1, turn 2, Biophagus. Turn 3, you would have 3 mana, potentially 4 mana for the commander. Then you'd have Termagant Swarm come down. Then you would have Kadama come down. All that would work pretty well. But Greater Good here, sacrificing Termagant Swarm would be like our only thing we could really do. Then we'd have to discard probably the Planeswalker and Doubling Seasons and stuff just to get 1 card. And then, at that point, we've kind of lost a good amount of our hands. So, I don't know on this one. It's making me not like Greater Good, though. Yeah. It's good card draw, but you also have to give a pretty powerful creature up. And you get a discard, which is a little rough. Where's my Biophagus? I'm going to go ahead and change that, I think. I don't know. I'm split on that like a lot. But if you don't do that, then you get gridlocked right here. If you don't get to the point where you can make X spells, draw cards, then we don't really have that much card draw anyway. Like we have, so our top card draws, you have like 13 or 14 or 15 X spells. So I mean that's what we're wanting to use for card draws. But we literally have if we're looking for base card draw, the Korra Planeswalker is probably one of our better card draws. Kindred Discovery is a really good card draw. Um, Greater Good would be one of our better card draws. Garruk's Uprising is a good card draw. So Garruk, Kindred, Korra are like the really good ones. And then we have a bunch of smaller ones that require X mana. And then I think there's one more somewhere. Maybe not. I like having 2 to 4 engines when it comes to stuff like if you have I like having 12 card draw cards in my deck and then 4 of those being like engine cards, like 3 or 4 of them. So like one in every 25 cards or so in the deck could potentially be an engine, so you don't need as much card draw. But I like those quick card draws a good bit as well. So I mean, 3 would probably be fine for us. Kindred Discovery, Garruk's Uprising, and Korra Beckoner could probably be pretty decent card draw. The Primal Vigor and Doubling Season potentially double the amount of card draw that we get off of our tokens, and then all of our doubling things potentially double or triple our card draw from our X spells as well. And we know there's a lot of X spells in here, so none of this really has any effect on that. So here we got 1, 2, technically 3. So this is the other engine, sort of. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Technically, Paleoloft would be a part of the draw engine. 9, 10, 11, 12. So we got 12 X spells. Or 12 draws, I should say. Hold on. Let me see. Let's just double check this again. Let's just do the X spells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then we have basically 2 other draw spells here. Well, basically we have Swarm Lord's given us 12, which basically just allows us to draw cards off of the cards that weren't big enough to draw cards if we waste our X spells. Paleoloft lets us recycle the X spells that are in the graveyard, so that's potentially a way for us to get an engine going. Greater Good and Paleoloft would work really good together, because then you could just Greater Good, sack a creature, draw cards, you summon a creature, Paleoloft triggers, bring something from your graveyard back to your hand, and then you could just do that over and over. But I think potentially Greater Good might get cut here. I don't know. Because this one's a pretty decent engine on her own. She's basically doubling the effect that our tokens would do. She's doubling the effects that the token draws will do. Technically quadrupling if we copy tokens. And then Primal Vigor and Doubling Season are both doubling the amount of card draw that we'll get from the X spells. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that basically double the power of our X spell draw. And then we have the 12 with the like we have 11 and then the Swarm Lord. And then Paleo Law. So we're already floating at like 18 or something. So we can probably make the cut with Greater Good, but I think Greater Good's just the potential is there to do something, you know. But really, it's just us getting off the ground early is probably the biggest thing, and then being able to rebuild is probably the second biggest thing in this deck. So let's I don't know. Let's put Biophagus in. We'll put them back in, boys. Let me pull out the old deck. Just so we have that early game start that we want, you know. Because so far, everything's running pretty smooth. Let me... Greater Good. So we put in Biophagus and Greater Good. So that just gives us... I mean, it's giving us more 1-1 counter synergy, I guess. But I'm not going to say it's the best deal in the world. Because you got to think, there's like... Probably 2 or 3 of those 18 cards are going to be wasted. And then Paleoloth only really cares about the other stuff, you know, if it's dead. So there we go, though. We got Greater Good back out for Biophagus, and then we'll come back and start drawing the cards again. Should be a great time. So now we come over here, we go to edit. Then we're gonna go over here and find Greater Good. Go ahead and erase that. And then we put in Biophagus. And then we go to the maybe cards and we find Biophagus. Tink. And then we put in Greater Good. Okay. Now we save. Go back to, how was this playtest? So enters tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. So we don't have to play that now. So we go blue. dink, and dink, and then Evolving Wilds, crack for green, I guess. And then the next turn, this would be a forest. We play a mountain. We tap 3 for Kelpie's Guide. Okay, next turn we draw, and we play a mountain. Oh, and that was a forest, so then we'd pay 4 for Commander. And then next turn we draw. These would be untapped. We play a forest. Or let's just play this. Okay, and then now we have Kelpie's Guide and the Commander. So I would probably say tap 1. Oh, well, I don't know if we do that. We have 2, takes 2 forests, so you could go forest, forest, Finale of Devastation. And then we'd be able to do it for 3, 5, 7. So we could do this for 5, and we would get 3 copies. So we could search out 5 or less. We could search out Master Biomancer. We could search out our Tyranid Prime, our Mana Tyranid, and we could search out probably the other Mana Dork guy who combos off with this dude. And basically in this whole turn, we would have a, a majorly big board and a ton of mana. And the next turn, whatever we're playing, that's an X spell eventually, would be pretty big. Even this Inspiring Call would be a big deal. So you just swing in with everything that we have, play your Inspiring Call, draw cards for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it, and they're getting indestructible. So then we'd be drawing probably at least 4 cards. 4, 5, 6 cards. And then basically here we would just be stuck playing creatures. So like this guy would come in really big. We don't have any X spells that we could copy. So it'd basically just be using these creatures as like beaters. You'd play your land, play your Twinning Staff or whatever, but then you'd play these guys that would come in as like 7/7s. They'd be your front line, and then eventually you'll run into something. Aggressive Biomancy. So yeah, I don't know. You could play Aggressive Biomancy and make like a ton of copies of Mana Dorks or a ton of copies of like Biomancy Master. And then at that point, every time that something comes in, like I'd probably just copy Biomancy Master. You make like, what would we do, like 3 or 4 copies of them, and then everything that comes in just gets absurdly huge for no reason. And then you could play literally like this person, and it becomes like a massive creature threat. But eventually you would end up, finding some X spell like this. So Moloch would come in eventually, and then you would cast it and copy it like 16 times. It would come in with like 1500 power, and then you'd nuke everybody. That's not what I was trying to do. Let's do playtest again. Two lands and a Patriarch Seal. I'd keep it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. First turn, draw. Forest. Next turn, draw. Island, tap 2. Biophagus. Next turn, draw. Land, tap 3. Patriarch Seal. Turn, draw. Land. I mean, you're tapping 4, but what do we do here? Basically, you could tap 4, play Commander, and then you could tap here, pay 1 to untap a land, but that would give you all colorless. You need a green for this. So I'd probably just leave that. Next turn, draw. Don't get a land. You could just go ahead and wait it out and play 1,000-Year Elixir. So I think I would probably just do that. Because we don't have 3 green for Fog Crawler. Probably just play 3 Tyranid Prime, tap 2, 1,000-Year Elixir, and then next turn you would draw, play a land, and then you would have, basically you need 1 green, and you'd have 1, 2, all these can tap for 2 colorless, so you'd have 2, 4, 6, 8, and then this would be 10, but that 2 mana would come here and here. So then you'd have 10, 12, and you would play this for 12 and make 3 copies of it. Oh, so then you would draw 3 cards, and you would have 3 12/12 hordes enter the battlefield, and then everything else would have evolved, so all these would grow in power by 1 when those come in. So these would get 3 1/1 counters on everything. So you'd have a 5/5, a 5/5, and like a 3/3/7. So 5/5, 5/5, 3/7. This could potentially be higher because you'd have 1/1 counters for each of these turns after she came out, so there'd probably be multiple things here. And then you'd have 3 12/12s on turn 6 or whatever. Do another play test. I want to find one that has the Biophagus in it. So this, you got 2 lands. 3, 1, 2, 3. So if you keep, first turn draw, play tapped land. Next turn you draw, play a forest. I'd probably just hold this, to be honest. Next turn draw. I guess you could have played the Tyranid Swarm if you really wanted to. early. So like last turn, you could have played this for 1 to make a 1/1 if you really wanted to. And then this turn, Evolving Wilds, sack it, find a blue. Next turn, you come in, play another land, play the Nocturne, which gives you all your mana coloring and stuff, potentially. Or you just play your commander. And then next turn, you'd have 6. So I'd probably play the Swarm for 5, which lets you draw a card, 2 cards. Next turn, you'd play a land. Then you would have 2 of these, 1 of these, your commander, probably tap and play Fog Crawler. That's just going to make everything massive. So literally like nothing can hurt you now and your stuff's going to get absurdly huge. And then next turn you come along. So you got another land. Probably pay 2 and these are interesting because they work together. So this one is when a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on this. But this one, it says whenever a creature you control dies, put X11 counters on target creature you control, where X is the power of the creature that died. So you could play both of these, and now if something dies, this will get put the 1/1 counters on something else, and this will put the 1/1 counters on itself. So you get double the 1/1 counters. And then at the beginning of combat, you can place these on something else, so it get pretty crazy. And then by the time we got Exocrine out there, Death Touch Reach, it'd be pretty crazy. And then even if these die, then we can play Paleoloth and then play Malloc right behind it. So I mean, pretty strong. That's the wrong thing. That's what I was trying to do. We do another playtest. So we got 2 lands. So we draw land, choose another color, probably choose red. And then next turn, we would play blue, tap, Chorus Follower. Next turn, probably do that. Scry's 1. We'd have these 2, so we have 3 mana. So I'll do these, tap, untap, Tyranid Prime. Next turn, you'd have enough for commander. Just play this tapped, I guess, even though it is good just to have this to keep, to bring back a sorcery, so could just play that. Choose Tyranid. And then we would play commander. Okay, and then the next turn, this would get 1 power. We would get to draw. We would have enough for this if we wanted to. So basically right here, I mean, we could try and go for like Fog Crawler. Um, so either do Fog Crawler or you do this. I think what you would do, because you could also try to board wipe here. So like if we cast this for 2, it would kill, you know, pretty much everything, but that's like an emergency situation, because if we killed everything, then we'd be down to 4 mana, and it wouldn't be the best for us. But you'd probably tap these for 6, and then play Tyranid Hydarian, or you'd put Biomancer in. Guess you could play that as well. Do this. Play Scream Killer. And then when you cast a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, it's going to deal 5 damage to other stuff. So then the next turn when you end up drawing, you would end up, you know, casting probably this. If you do Biomancer first, it's going to be better, because then you put a 1/1 counter on it. Everything's going to come in with 3 1/1 counters, and the next turn you'd play this, and it would come in with like as an 8/8 or something. This would do 5 damage to something. Then when this attacks, all of those 1/1s are going to be turning into like 5/5s. And then you'd probably try and play Fog Crawler, because it's going to make everything bigger, and then if you block with anything, you're pretty safe. So all that's pretty good. That's probably the biggest thing that like that one card does, is 1/1 counters for blocking would be pretty nice. Yeah, this wasn't a bad hand either, though. That wasn't the right thing. Another play test. Got 1 land here. Only need 3 for the Conjurer, though, so you could wait this out if you wanted to. Let's say that you wanted to keep a bad hand, and you're like, oh, I want this hand. So first turn, we get a land. So you play that. Second turn, just play this one. Comes in tapped. Third turn, this is untapped. Play third land. Tap 3. Conjurer guy. And then fourth turn, tap 3, tap, untap. Or you'd untap this, then tap this, summon commander. And then fourth turn, island. So we got 5, 7 mana here. 2 short of Helm of the Host. But we do got Strionic Resignator. We could detonate ourselves if we really wanted to. Because if we do 7, this comes in with 4, which would reduce this down to 3 mana. But we wouldn't have this guy left over to untap this for another green. So we'd have mana issues. We just have green mana issues right now. Okay, could put a 1/1 counter on him though. how much? Greatest power among creatures you control. So you get 4, 5, 7, or you do 4, 6, 8. Do this to 5. Would bring this to 4, but you'd still need 2 green. So you'd probably do green, blue, 2, 4, tap, untap, 6, aggressive biomancy. You'd put your 1/1 counter for combat and stuff on this guy, so it'd be like a 3/4. This you would have 2 copies. So 4, 6, 8. So you'd have this for 3. 3 tokens, copies of target creature, except they have when this creature enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So I would copy this guy. You would make 3 copies. They would come in, and then they would fight whoever for like 3 damage. So you get like 3 lightning bolts going off right now. And then next turn would happen, and you would have 3 of those guys. You draw in. This is the turn where you'd have a ton of mana. So basically, you could cast Helm of the Host and equip it, or you could cast the Great Henge. We get a 1/1 counter on here. I'd probably just do like 4 for the Helm of the Host. And then you would do 2, 4, 5, equip, Helm of the Host. And then you would have 2 more uses here that you could do. So you could do another one, tap, Stronic Resignator. And then you could do, basically you could do another 2. This is probably costing like 5, but you wouldn't have enough. But then you go to combat, and you'd make a second Lucia Kane. And I think this, yeah, so you'd only get 1/1 counter, but you get a second Lucia Kane. And the token has haste. So you would have potentially 4 mana with these 2 and another one of these to untap. So you go after combat. If you had the green, well, actually, let's say that this guy got to like 5, then you'd have 4 mana here. Yeah, you wouldn't have the green for it. That sucks. Anyway, you go to the next turn. Now you have 4 of these dudes, 2 Lucia Canes, and a Stronic Resignator. You play a land. We basically, the only thing that we can summon a lot of is Exocrine, which kind of sucks. But we could also do Death's Presence and then do Exocrine, and then every Exocrine that dies would put its 1/1 counters on the next Exocrine, potentially. That's probably the only way you could really do this. But you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you would have 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17. And then you would get another one of these on combat, which would be 19. And then Stronic Resignator to bring this back down to 17 to copy the effect and get another one. So then you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 copies for like 17, and you play Exocrine for like, let's say 15 or something, and it would basically kill everybody at the table. So you'd need to like do it for like 10, and that would still be like 80 damage to everybody. So you could do, if you do 5, that would be 40 damage. If you do 4, be 36 damage with 4. So yeah, you could nuke everybody a good amount. If you had the most life, you would win right here. If not, I mean, Pure Stream Gene Stealer, you could do Winged Hive Tyrant and just give these guys flying. So put this guy down. These are getting 1/1 counters on everything. Then they all get flying. And then you can just smack somebody for commander damage repeatedly. That would be fun. Bone Sabers next turn. Bone Sabers. It's a lot of counters. This is where things would be interesting because you could do this. And then when she makes a copy, if she makes a copy of anything, it would go. But if this Helm of the Host makes a copy, we could also just copy these. Or Helm of the Host makes a copy, and we could turn it into a copy of Hive Tyrant or Pure Strength Gene Stealer or anything else. This is kind of like a fun card that I don't necessarily need in the deck. Because this could be a tutor card right now, which would be really good. If we had that tutor right here, we could search out 3 or 4 combo pieces that would make this really good. Master Biomancer and all that stuff could be on the field right now. We could have like, I don't know, probably a full board of cards ready to go right here. But if we do, the other option would be the Rite of Passage would allow us to put it down and just grow everything a little bit. I think the tutor card would potentially be better right here though. Rite of Passage, I don't know if we necessarily need. It just sounds good. Because every time these guys attack, if they get blocked or whatever, just slowly get bigger. Another playtest real quick. We got Biophagus. So, first turn we'd have this. Biophagus would have been the 4-drop sacrifice draw cards card. Now, we would have had enough to play it, but then we would have to have sacrificed Swarmlord or Gene Stealer Patriarch, which doesn't seem very good. Here, first turn, land. Second turn, land, tap 2, Biophagus comes in. Third turn, we get another land, tap 4, Commander comes in with an extra 1/1 counter. So, combat comes, she turns into a 3/3. Next turn, these untap. And we get, we have 5 mana here. Or we got 6 mana here. So we can do this for 6 play Kindred Discovery, play tapped land for turn, and then next turn we would draw. Tapped land comes in, name Tyranid on Kindred Discovery, and then you can do basically you need 1 green for this guy, and then you need 2 or you need 2 mana, 4. So that'd be 2, 3, 4, 5. And we could play Aberrant and draw 4 cards. Or we could do Patriarch Seal and try to get more of these guys next time. I'd probably hold this back. So you'd probably just do Gene Stealer Patriarch here. For 5, so you'd have, this is a tap land, you'd do 5, and then you'd have 2 left over. Or you just do screw it. I'd probably just do 3 Patriarch Seal, and then you have 3, 4, 5 here. So at this point, you could do, I'd probably just go ahead and do 1 Ozolith, then you tap 3, make a 1/1 Aberrant that gets copied, so you get 2 1/1 Aberrants, which lets you draw 2 cards. And then next turn, you draw in, we got this, but now we have a lot of mana. These 2 1/1s can give us 1/1 counters on something else. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana. Or we go 8 down to 7, up to 9, or whatever. So at this point, I mean, we got Hive Tyrant Guard here, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Use one of these, go back down to 7, untap creature. This goes back up, go down to 9. We get 2 copies. Play Hive Tyrant. We get 2 of these that are going to be 12 12s. 2 copies that are 12 12s. That will get us 4 cards. And then now we can sacrifice these to make things indestructible and hexproof. So we got board protection. And then if we sacrifice those, their 1/1 counters will go on this. And then we can put them on another creature. And then now we go like next turn. So basically we could Starstorm everybody and kill everything. And let these 13s run people over. But we could do 2, 3, 4, 5. And then dump Gene Stealer Patriarch out, potentially. Or you could play Lithoform Engine and then copy your triggered abilities. Or you could play Lithoform to copy the Gene Stealer later. So you pay 4 mana, and then next turn, when you cast Gene Stealer, we can copy permanent spell you control for 4 mana. So you'd need 9, which would be pretty interesting. So yeah, let's do you do 4. Put Lithoform down. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'd have enough to do something else if we wanted to. Or you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, tap 5, and then you would have like Star Storm for 3, copied twice, so you could hit everyone for like 9 damage here. But it seems like we'd have enough to play Gene Stealer, so 1 blue, all that for 5, pop Gene Stealer down. If we wanted to, but basically you're gonna lose out on copying it, which is fine. Next turn you draw, you get a land, you tap for 4, whatever, then you pay whatever, equip Gene Stealer with the Helm of the Host, or you can equip the Hiveguard Tyrant with Helm of the Host, and then every turn you can just sacrifice a token, and your stuff is just infinitely indestructible forever, basically, which is kind of interesting. And then, got a land. Got Death's Presence, would allow us to double the amount of counters that we have, so we could play this. And now when something like when these 13/13s die, 13 counters go on this, 13 counters go on this, combat, this puts them on something, and then this just immediately puts it on something anyway. So if this 13/13 died, then we could put 26 damage or something on like the Gene Stealer, and then just copy tokens of the Gene Stealer. Deck pops off pretty hard, I will admit. And now we have Animar in there because since we took Greater Good out, Animar's still in the deck. Although we haven't seen him in a while. Let's see. Tap land, 5-drop. So, I mean, we have a creature that we can play, but it's not ideal. But we do have Pure Strain Gene Stealer and Bone Sabers, so I'm not opposed to this hand, to be honest. So, turn 1, I'd probably just do this. Scry 1, look for a land. And then next turn, 7. I would have had one more card. So next turn, we could play 2, or we could play this tap land. So I'd probably play second tap land, tap, this guy comes out. Next turn comes, we play this land. Tap 3, Pure Strain Gene Stealer comes out. Comes in with 2/1/1 counter, so it's a 3/3. Okay, then next turn, we do this. We could go ahead and we could go for our commander, which is probably the right play here, because this turn, like we played commander last turn or whatever, or this turn, then next turn we could have played this and had like a bigger board state. But if we get Gene Stealer going, it's going to get us a bunch of lands, which is kind of nice. And we can kind of get it pseudo vigilance here. So probably tap 3 and just play. Like if we swing and say that this got us a land, we'd be at 4. So you tap 3, Bone Sabers. Next turn, you pay the 4 for commander. Swing in with Gene Stealer, try to get another land. Then you'd have 3. It's probably not the most optimal way. Probably should just go with this and then play the commander. Focus on Gene Stealer after, because Bone Sabers is pretty strong in general. And then now, like, when we have these 2 mana, for instance, like, if we have, let's say you have, well, basically, if you cast an X spell, you can pay 2 mana, Strionic Resignator this to get extra counters on it, which give you more X mana to spend on these other X spells. Or you can Strionic Resignator this guy to get 2 lands, or you could Strionic Resignator Bone Sabers to make him massive. So like if you play Strionic Resignator and then we equip Bone Sabers to this dude, and he goes to attack next turn or whatever, then we can pay 2 mana, tap Strionic Resignator to this. He gets 8 1/1 counters and becomes like a 10/10 in like 1 turn. And they detonate him, you just slide this over to this guy, or like when the commander comes down, this guy is going to double all of our mana anyway. So that's pretty crazy. Another playtest. Alright, we got one with Animar, so this will be interesting. Every time we've had Animar in our hand, it's kind of blocked up at the very beginning. So, first turn, draw. Evolving Wilds, look for a mountain. Next turn, draw. We go for a forest. I'll probably go ahead and play that for 1. Next turn, draw. 3. We play Animar. Okay. Next turn, draw. We have 4. We play... I would say just play Biomancer, to be honest. Probably play 4 Biomancer. Animar gets a 1/1 counter. Next turn, we draw. Now we'll have our commander 1 cost 1 less. But we still need this green to cast. So we got 1 free blue. This costs 2 mana now. But if we cast our commander, so we cast 3 here, 1 cost reduction, commander comes out, he gets another 1/1 counter. So now these cost 2 less. Tap 1, Clever Conjurer comes out, he gets another 1/1 counter, so these cost 3 less. But this only works on creature spells. But now when we cast Termagant Swarm over here, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Also, these would both come in with 1/1 counters from this guy. But we'll have 4, 6, 8, and then reduction of 3 for 11. So this is going to be coming in as like an 11/11. 2 11/11s at turn 4 or 5. Pretty good. All right, turn 1. We draw. We got 2, 3 lands, which is fun. We got Biophagus in this one, so this would have been Greater Good again, which we've seen Greater Good just doesn't work in the starting hands. This would have been 4 mana Greater Good, and then we had Greater Good in our commander, which wouldn't have been that great. But with Biophagus, we could potentially get this Tyranid thing out quicker. So we do turn 1 tap land, and then we would draw for next turn, turn 2 land, tap 2 Biophagus 3 mana, and then turn 3 we play blue, and then we tap that, get commander, and then next turn we do this, land 5, we got 7, tap this. I'd play this thing, put a 1/1 counter on it. So this would be a 2/2, this would be a 5/5. Next turn, we'd end up drawing. We got 4, 5, 7. So I'd probably just do 3 Coalition Relic. Probably do 3 Patriarch Seal. And then you would attack with this, make some small guys, tap this to add a charge counter. And then next turn we would draw. These would be untapped. Pre-combat main phase, we would get 1 mana off of this of any color. So now we tap this for 2 mana. And then we will have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 copy. Use 1 to tap this, to untap this. Then we go to 10, cast this for 8. Copy twice. We get... Basically, we can cast this for 8 or we can cast it for 4. And if we cast it for 4, then we could make 2 copies with aggressive biomancy, potentially. Or we could make a copy of something with aggressive biomancy, so we could copy like a big mana dork or some other creature. But I think here we just do this, and then we'd find whatever creature that we have that's like 8 or less mana, and we would make 3 of them. Which I'm not sure what I would pick, to be honest with that. And then after that, we got aggressive biomancy, so we can basically kind of clear the board. We're going to be able to destroy like 3 creatures and make 3 tokens. And then we're going to be able to draw quite a lot with Inspiring Call. And then we still got a board wipe right there, so it's not, Bone Sabers. Nothing too bad there. I don't know what we would look up for 8 mana. 8 or less. We have 1 9-drop, which is the Great Henge, so we're not paying 9 for that. So we could have went for 6. That was already on the field, so we could have got Swarmlord and we could have got Fractal Bloom, which Fractal Bloom would have been okay. We couldn't copy Swarmlord with it. We could copy the Hadrian, though. Keep copying this and make more and more and more of them. Because this would double the amount of doubles that we had. So if we used our copies to make more of these, each additional one of these would double the doubles. So that would probably be the play. But we wasted 2 mana. The other things we could have got... So Paleoloth would have been good. So probably would have got... You probably get Fractal Bloom, Paleoloth, and then Vigor would have probably been the other good one because it protects everything. You can just swing in with the 1/1s and they're just going to keep getting bigger until someone deals with this. But Paleoloth would have also been a pretty decent pick. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Good to know that I don't have really anything that I can look up for 8 mana. I mean, the Biotitan is basically the biggest thing that we can get. So 6 is the highest that we need to go. This deck is pretty solid. Play test. First turn draw. We will have tap land. Tap land. So we got 2 lands and Animar. This is the kind of hand where we have problems with. So we got rid of that other green card to get that mana. And Animar is still kind of blocky, but if this takes off, it'll take off. Like if we get Helm of the Host on Animar, then things can get cost reduced so much that it'll just get massive. So that's a major threat here. 2 lands is kind of rough, but basically, I mean, we just play how we got to play it. So, game 1 life. I would do this, tap, scry 1, look for a land. That's not a land. I would I would totally get rid of that. And then I would do next turn. You would draw. Okay. And we'd play second tap land, gain a life. Tap this, play Hardened Scales. Next turn, draw. Another tap land, not the best for us, to be honest. And we don't have red, so we'd play tap land. Okay. That's gonna be our main. This is our main play that we would have right here. Need things to die to get 1/1 counters. Probably tap 2 Stronic Resignator. And then next turn we would draw Terramorphic Expanse. So this would get us our red, but it would take another turn. And then this takes 4. So we're kind of blocked up here. There's not anything that we can do. So next turn we would draw. We'd have red, play a mountain. Now we can kind of take off, but we got to make decisions here. So we have to do. We don't have any X spells that we can do. So we probably just do 3 for Animar. And then probably, I mean, we're going to get 2 1/1 counters for each 1/1 counter that he gets. And if we have the extra mana, we can Stronic Resignator it to get another 1/1 counter, or actually 2 more 1/1 counters, because we can Stronic Resignator him, which will give this another trigger. So we got 2 mana. I can't do anything here. And he isn't super threatening. So next turn we draw. These would untap. We have 5 mana. So that would all be kind of hard to deal with. We could do Winged Tyrant. Yeah, let's do... Smart move's probably Harrowsphex, if we're going to be honest. Pay the 4, play Harrowsphex. This gets a 1/1 counter, which gets 2 1/1 counters. So basically we have 3 mana open right now for creatures. And then next turn we would draw. Don't know if anything would die for Harrowsphex, but we got a 3/3 and a 2/2. So creatures cost 3 less right now. So I can summon Hive Tyrant for 2, and it has haste, so that's probably the best call. So you do red, blue, Hive Tyrant comes in, +1 counter to 4, goes to 5. So everything is 4 less right now. So we could play this for 1. Or we could draw 2 cards. Yeah, probably just pay the 1 for this. This comes in. This goes up to 6. And then I'd probably just pay the 2. Stronic Resignator go up to 8. So now everything costs 7 less to cast. That's a creature. And then basically I messed up here because I could have nuked something for 5. But these come in with haste. Or no, this one doesn't. Should have played this one first. Play this, hit something for 5. And now these have haste and flying. So this one is 8 and this one is 4. So we already got 12 damage flying on the board, which is pretty good. Then we draw a card. Unblockable can enter. We could play our commander here, but we don't have any X spells to really consider at the moment. We got doubling season that we could play, but nothing major that we can do. Also, I can choose new targets for the copy, so I probably could have copied this. The second 2 counters I would have put on Hive Tyrant, so this would have been 6, and this would be yeah, so let's make both of these 6s. And then basically we can play this for 2 mana. It comes in. He gets 2 counters. So he goes up to 8. Pay 2 Strionic. Then we put 2 counters on Scream Killer. So now we have 8, 6, 7. And then when we go to combat, or no, we don't put this on him. We put these on him. So he's a 6/6, and then he gets haste and flying because of this. Then we go to combat. You put a 1/1 counter on it, which would be 2 1/1 counters. So this would go to 8, and then it puts a 1/1 counter on another target attacking creature. So we can put a 1/1 counter on Scream Killer. So this will go to 7. This is 8. This is 7. This is 6, and this is 8. And then we would have next turn draw land. Probably swing in with these. Pay 3. Inspiring Call. Draw 4. Okay, and now we have 3 mana. Could play Sporogeist, get an extra land, but I don't think there's. I mean, we could pay the 2 mana to Strionic Resignator, Trigon Prime. So when they attack, we would be able to put an additional 1/1 counter, so get another 2 1/1 counters, and then we can put 2 1/1 counters on Harrowspecs, and that would have given us an additional card on the draw. And then next turn, Kadamas would just draw all of our lands. You'd be able to draw like 5 lands every turn with this. Pretty easy. So basically, we're in a pretty good spot. I mean, you just play a land, play the commander. We got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we have extra mana here. So, I mean, you could pay 4 commander, 3 for Kelpie's Guide or this thing. And then we could take 2 counters off of this if we wanted to for another 2 mana. But, you know, basically next turn you would draw, you play your land, then you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you could do 8 mana, potentially like 10 to 12 mana here, 14 untap, 16. Then you could pay 2 of that Stronic Resignator itself, so you do 3 copies at 14 mana when you cast Sporogeist. So you get 7 lands, 3, so you get 27 lands out. And you get to draw 3 cards. Let's do one more. First turn. 3 land hand. Tap land's kind of rough. Probably play this Scry 1. I don't really need anything here. Probably Scry 1 for a... Well, we don't really need a land, so I'd probably just... If it's a land, I'd probably bounce it. Put it at the bottom. Next turn, you draw... I put the other tap land in. Probably... Yeah, screw it. I'd probably... I don't know. It's safer to do that, but if we drew into a land on our next turn, it would speed up our beginning of the game. So it's a risk you'd have to take if you want to. I'll say take the risk. So I'd play this. Tap 2, Stronic Resignator, and then bust it on the land. So we'd have a tap land coming next turn, which kind of sucks. Probably just pay the 2, play Termagant Swarm for 1, so we get a 1/1 on board. And when it dies, we can copy it and get 2 on 1s, potentially. Next turn, we draw. These come untapped. Tap for Mana Rock. Oh yeah, if we played the Mana Rock and then we played that thing, then we would get 2 charge counters on it. So I could have did that and got 2 charge counters and then put mana for each charge counter for expels. But that's alright. Basically, we did this. We got a 1/1 blocker. Do this. Next turn, draw. Still no lands. Tap for commander. Commander comes down. Next turn, we would draw. So we got 6 mana potentially. We didn't have Termagant Swarm to grow before, so we could try and cast Kindred Discovery, which would give us some card draw, but it would be a little bit slower. Um, but Master Biomancer is also pretty important for us here, so it's hard to say. Biomancer gives us 2 extra power to everything else. And then those 1/1 counters, we could play Horospecs next turn. And then we could have 2 extra mana that we could play with. So that would get us up to 8 mana. Potentially. I'd probably do Swarmlord. Comes out 7/7. If this dies, then it'll get to draw a card off of it. Gives us a little bit more protection. Gives us a strong attacker next turn. And then next turn we do this. We have do Kindred Discovery. Because this is just when something enters. So when this dies and these 1/1s enter, because we'll name Tyranid, even if it's only 1/1/1, it'll be 1 card and then 1 card from Swarmlord. And then, yeah, this is probably the slowest turn we've had for the last however many hours. So you'd have another tap land come in. So tap for 6. Probably just go ahead and play Tyranid Hardian. Lets me draw a card when it enters. And then we'd play land, or no, we just did a tap land, so we'd get that. Next turn, we would get, I mean, this is a 7/7, 8/8, or 9/9 right now, depending on what you do. But 7/7, this is only 2 mana, and it replaces the mana that you use, so I just cast that. So now, we can tap this for 2 mana, and when a creature enters battlefield under control, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. So now we have 2, 3, 4, 5. This would have, or no, it wouldn't. So I'd play that, play a Biomancer, draw a card off of it, go to combat, smack with this thing. Well, technically, yeah, you smack with these. Maybe you get like 1 or 2 Tyranids that come down. So you could draw maybe 1 or 2 cards. And then next turn you play that, go here, play Coalition Relic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this, we got 5, I'll pay 3 mana. Do this, copy this, make 2 more of these, draw 3, actually draw 6 cards. These will come in with an additional 1/1 counters, so I'll have 3 2/2s, and then they also get 2 from this, so they'd be 3 4/4s. And then I would have also this that I could have put into them to make them 5/5s. But yeah, I don't know. This one was the roughest start, I think, and it still turned out okay, I guess. This one, we have Ozolith, we got a bunch of lands, Broodlord, One Eye. Yeah. So this you'd basically play tap land. Need two more basics for that. Probably do Thriving Grove. Do blue. And then next turn we would draw. Not anything major that we can do there. Probably just, I mean, we have the green, so like, you could play a second green, play Nexios, then next turn play a third green, and then go for this. I mean, that probably has the most tempo. So, I mean, second green, tap 2, Nexios. No, Nexios wouldn't be worth it. Just do tap 2, Ozla Shattered Spire. Then you draw next turn, another land, tap 3, play Brewlord. Enters, you can distribute X11 counters among other creatures, but it doesn't have any, so it's a 3/3. And then the next turn, you would draw. I'd probably just go ahead and sack land for a blue or red, whichever. And then we have 3 mana. Probably just go ahead and dump 2 into this. So put a 1/1 counter on target artifact or creature control. So I'd put a 1/1 counter on this guy. And then if one or more 1/1 counters would be put on artifact creature control, that many +1. So we're going to put 2 1/1 counters on Broodlord, making it a 5/5. So it's getting there. And then the next turn, we have 4 mana. So we can play Nexios and then potentially up it to a 4/4 is probably what you do. So play 2 Nexios, pay 2, turn this into a 4/4. So we get a 5/5 4/4. Next turn, land. And then we could either go for Gene Sealer Patriarch or we can go for Kadama of the West Tree. So I'd probably just do for Kadama. Tap 2. Put 2 1/1 counters on. I would say Kadama, but it's not attacking this turn. But yeah, I guess you do Kadama. So you get a 5/5 4/4 5/5. Swing in with 2 modified creatures, potentially get a land out of it or 2. Next turn, you end up drawing. Didn't get anything. So at this point, for each 1/1 counter that we take off of these guys, if we get it 5 1/1 counters, this only costs 2 mana for a Bio Titan. So we got 2 counters on Kadama. I don't really care about 2 counters on this guy, 2 counters on this guy. So we could get rid of them all, but then we lose our mana ramp. Conversely, we can try and go for old One Eye. 2, 3, 4, 5. We're just 1 mana short. So if we would have gotten a land off of that last dill, we could play old One Eye. which would then make a 5/5, and then everything would have trample, and we'd be getting more lands off of this. And then the next turn, Finale Devastation's good, but we could do like Doubling Season or anything else. I don't know how this would work, because it makes twice as many counters. Put an infection counter on target creature defending player controls. But basically at this point we could go into the Biotitan, or we could just keep swinging in to get more lands from these guys. And we don't really need to summon our commander because we're doing okay. But if the board wipe, we would just summon the commander and then pop the Finale of Devastation. Um, yeah, and then here we could dump all of this onto this. But for this, I think it's only really worth putting 2 mana in because you're getting double the value off of it. As soon as you go to 3 or 4, it isn't doing as much. So if we have this and a Tyranid token that comes with this guy, and we have these lands here. Say we had some more lands. I do 2, 2, 2, and then 2 probably on this guy. And then so they're just going to get bigger and bigger here. And then draw into some more stuff, spore guys, so we get more lands, land, destruction, protection. All right, one more. Oh, okay, first turn. Bunch of lands, not bad, not shabby. Just depends on what you want to do first. Mangus is all right. So probably just do a tap land, but we have quite a bit of stuff we can do early, so. Uh, we don't need Magus right now, so we'll do Path of Ancestry, tapped, turn, and then we will do tapped bridge, tap this. We'll summon that, or we'll just summon the Mangus. Why not? Have a blocker. Turn, and then these untap. We play Mountain. Don't really need to play her right now, so I'd probably just pay 2 Strionic, pay 1 other thing, maybe swing with this guy, turn, and then it'd pop down another land, probably pop the commander. Oh, and then so now basically the next turn you'd have 5 lands. See, like you could pay 3, bring down the Thassa, and then you would have basically 2, or you could do 1, 2, 3. 4. Tap him for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you would tap 4, untap 4, tap 4. pay 1 off of her, untap her, tap her again, and you'd have like another 6 or whatever, and then you could do another 4, so you'd have 8 to 12 mana right here. So if we went for 12, this would take 9, so we'd have 3 left over. But that's what I'd probably do. I'd probably just play Helm of the Host, equip Helm of the Host to her, go to combat. Helm of the Host makes a token copy of her, I think with haste. So now we would have basically another one of her that we can copy, or add 2 mana, or whatever else that we want to do. But 1/1 counter, next turn, boom. Play your tapped land. Play your Coalition Relic. But you can also do the Fractal Bloom. Oh, and then the Fractal Bloom we could use to copy anything into anything else. If we wanted to. Coalition Relic. You'd have 2 of these guys and the Untapper, plus a ton of mana potential here. So you could probably just do all that. Untap this a few times. Summon Fractal Bloom. Go to combat. This makes a copy of her, which we can turn to something else, but we won't. So now we have 2. Or we have 3 commander copies. And then 2 1/1 counters getting placed on something else. But we haven't ran into like any draw cards or expels, which sucks. All we got here is a Biophagus. We go into this guy. Basically, you can tap for 1 and give us a 1/1 counter when we spend the mana on something. So we could just copy and make a bunch of Biophaguses using the bloom. And then when we cast something, it'll just be big for no reason. And this would also help protect our commander a bit, but got another untap spell, so it looks like we're just drawing into untap stuff. We didn't draw any heat, so what? Our first thing that we would have is a board wipe. We didn't have any real power generation besides our commander, and then we get a board wipe that we could copy and kill everybody at the table potentially. That's about it. This guy, just more mana. More mana. Counters. That's our first. This is our first expel that we drew, which isn't good. Seems like every time I'm about done, I run into one bad hand. Fractal Bloom, if I had that into anything else, I mean, it's definitely a card that I could cut and not feel bad about. So, I mean, we could put the tutor card in there and keep Rite of Passage, because Rite of Passage still gives us 1/1 counter synergy, I guess. But I don't know how this plays out. So Evolving Wilds, look for, I don't know, red or something. And then next turn, we play this, scry 1. Or we don't play that. I don't know, we probably just play that. Next turn, draw. Land. This really isn't the best play, so probably just play 2 Mage Stone. Turn, land. Commander. And then next turn, land. 3, 4, 5, 7, so 6. So you do all this for 6, make 2 copies of this, draw 3 cards. Now we got 3 5/5s. When it dies, it makes a number of those Tyranids. And now we pop a land the next turn. You could play the Fractal Bloom and keep copying the Termagant Swarm if we wanted to. That'd probably be the funniest thing to do, is that you just keep copying that and making the Termagant Swarms. But Fractal Bloom also requires X-Spells, and we don't have like a ton of X-Spells in the deck, so it's kind of hard to say. But if there's any kind of interesting creatures that we can copy, and that's it. Tyranid Swarm would be the most interesting. Copy 5/5s right here. But you only get one extra one, so basically we could just pop this guy out and pop out a couple more. So, or Aberrant, we could pop out some more swarms. So I'd probably just do the 6 or whatever, play Fractal Bloom, put 1/1 counters on Fractal Bloom probably, and then next turn you draw, play another land or whatever, and then you'd probably just, I don't know, do 1 for Hardened Scales, or you do 1 for this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, pay 1, 9, 10. Xenothrope comes in. Oh, for 8. Copied twice. First copy just turned it into a Termagant Swarm. And I guess it would still come in with 8 1/1 counters, so they'd probably just turn into like a 13/13 Termagant Swarm, and then we'd do 2 deals of 8 damage to somebody. Do. And then the next turn, we just do this and play probably Hardened Scales, or we do Stronic Resignator for 2. And then we'd end up playing Aberrant, dumping all this stuff here, tapping that, tapping this, tapping that, to tap this like 4 times or whatever. The first copy, Fractal Bloom, turn it into a Termagant Swarm, and then we'd have like 3 Aberrants and a bunch of Termagant Swarms. So the people destroyed our board. We just have a ton of 1/1 Termagants everywhere. And then that would be a good play. And Inspiring Call would allow us to draw like 15,000 cards. All right, I gotta go. Y'all guys have a good one. I'm tired.